I'd like to share a question that somebody asked me earlier this week, and I'd like your opinion. The question at first might seem like a no-brainer to you. The question was, there is a law which says that on Shabbos, you're not allowed to, in your prayers, in your davening, you're not allowed to ask for personal needs on Shabbos. You can speak on behalf of the community, but you're not allowed to ask for personal needs on Shabbos. So this person wanted to know, if that's the case, are you allowed to ask for your personal needs on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? I'd like your opinion on that. Are you allowed to ask for your personal needs on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? And seeing, of course, that it's coming up in exactly a week's time, you should really get this answer right. So what would you say, Louis?
I would think that if you generally prayers are done as a community, everything is our and we and that.
Right.
And if it was something personal, you would say it in the plural, so it would be still the same thing. So if you wanted personal good health or whatever the case is, you'd say we want good health.
Okay, so you're saying you can ask for your personal things provided you word them in the plural. Grant us. Yes? Okay, I like that.
I think it is for us because it's an introspection of ourselves during Rosh Hashanah.
Right. So Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is an introspective time, and if it's an introspective time, then you're saying that's dafka when we should ask for what we need. Anything else? Any other thoughts?
Depends what you call need.
You see, there had to be a philosopher in the group. Depends what you mean by need, okay? So can I develop the question just a little further for a second before dealing with how we answer this question? What is the nature of the period, 48-hour period known as Rosh Hashanah? If you had to sort of summarize it in a bite-sized version, what is the nature of this time? What's happening? It's the day of, or the days of, because even though it's 48 hours, we refer to it as a day, but it's the day of what? Judgment, right? Okay. What does judgment mean? How's it? What does judgment mean?
Introspection, as somebody said.
I see. Okay, there we go again. What? In other words, I'm asking this question: what exactly? Who is judging, and what are they judging? Okay, let's take it A and B. Who's judging? Hashem, right? So even if you walk into one of those shuls where they look you up and down, it's really Hashem who's supposed to be judging. Okay? Right, so he's judging. What's he judging?
Your past performance.
Your past performance. For what purpose? Why is he judging your past year's performance?
To see what
you deserve in the next
year.
Okay. So to see what you deserve going forward. In other words, it's a day of judgment where Hashem decides what's coming. It's not only that he's looking at what was, he decides what's coming. Okay, hold that thought. Next thought. What's the name of this holiday again? Rosh Hashanah, right, Steve? What's Rosh Hashanah? Because you emphasized it. The head of the year. It's not New Year's. No. There is no term in Hebrew for New Year's. It's called the head of the year. It's not called day one of 5774. It's called the head of the year. What's the significance of the head of anything? Control. Right? Look at the human brain. The human brain controls everything about the human body. How's it? Right? The human brain controls everything about the human body. In the same vein, if this is the head of the year, swing around. You can sit right here if you want. Depends how brave you are. Don't sit there. Someone's going to bang the door into you. Okay. So, the head of the year implies, in the same way as the head of the person controls everything about the person, the head of the year controls everything about the coming year. Does that add up logically? Yes? It's an acceptable theorem, right? Louis says no.
You get Rosh Chodesh. I mean,
exactly. And
Rosh Chodesh, you say Rosh Hashanah, it's just different.
So, no, I'm saying I would say the exact opposite. Rosh Chodesh is the day that determines everything about the month that's coming on the micro scale. And Rosh Hashanah determines everything that's coming on the macro scale for a whole year. And that's why we call it the Day of Judgment, because God is judging what type of a year it's going to be on the macro scale for the world at large, and on the micro scale for you, the individual. That's what's being judged over here as Rosh Hashanah comes in. Which essentially means, tell me if you agree with this. If you don't agree with this, that's fine. But tell me if you agree with this. That essentially means that you've got to come along to Rosh Hashanah. This is the time. Everything's being determined, right? If you have anything that you need for this coming year, this surely has to be the best time to ask for it. Is that logical? God is deciding the recipe and the budget and the nature of the whole year that's coming. Everything. Is this not the best time to ask for what you need?
But then shouldn't he know what you need if he's got this plan?
That's right. Okay, that's. But maybe we're the co-planners, right? That's why he wants us all in shul. He's like, meet me in my office, right? How's it going? Because we got to work this thing out. This is sort of like a budgetary meeting, I'd like your input. That's what it seems like. I don't know. We're discussing at this stage in some sort of a theoretical level. And if, in fact, if you vehemently disagree, now would be the time to say that to say that you vehemently disagree. That this is, if you feel this is not the time to speak up and ask for what you need for the coming year, please tell us now.
Are you being judged for your thoughts or your actions?
Yes. So,
actions in the past year or the actions that you may follow in the following year?
Okay, this is a very good question. Are you judged on what has happened or what is likely to happen? And again, I'll say yes. Right? It has everything to do with what's happened until now, and everything to do with the fact that God can read your mind and see if that resolution is really going to stick, or if it's just a throwaway thing, because that's what you've got to do. They gave out a card in shul that said, choose a mitzvah. He said, the rabbi's going to get on my back. Okay, fine. Yeah? So, I'd like to propose that... Sorry.
I was just wondering that it seems like it starts with a day of judgment.
Right.
Judgment. And then we're straight away talking about requests.
Right.
Shouldn't there be a time in between for repentance and redemption?
Good question. So, can you hold that thought? Okay? For a long time. Till the end. And then tell me if you still have the question. Okay? Fair enough? So, but there is a great leap of faith over here to go from judgment to requests. There really is. So I'm just framing it in that context of, well, he's judging everything that's going to happen for the year. So if you would like something, now's the time to ask. I don't want to say forever hold your peace, but pretty much this is a good time to ask.
How much chutzpah do I have?
Exactly. It's like when you have, just because it's on my mind, as you'll notice through the curtains, when you have construction going on, you want to put in your requests before things set. You don't want to go back after and say, I didn't really want that wall over there. I think you could put it there. So that's the same sort of concept. This is the time, Rosh Hashanah. God is producing this new year. He's putting all the pieces in place. If you have something to say it now. Don't wait until halfway through and say, oh, gosh, this is actually what I need. And say, well, I've already planned this year for you. Now, what's interesting about this is, and you'll excuse the metaphor, but I feel sometimes, present company excluded, and that's just because of the way you've answered the questions, but I feel that sometimes there are people who arrive in shul with a wish list that makes Rosh Hashanah not all that much different from sitting on Santa's lap. I've been a good boy. This is what I'd like for the year. That's sort of a concept. And you see this. Maybe you've seen it in your experience as well. I can tell you, I've definitely seen it in my experience. There are all these people, and they say, I made sure to ask for all the things. Like I thought about it, and I know what I need for the coming year, and I worked it all out. I came with this lengthy list of what things I have to ask from God, and I'm sure that I aced it this year. Because last year I forgot something, but this year I got it all in. In fact, I've been working on my list for some time already. With everything that went wrong last year, I put on the list to request for this Rosh Hashanah.
But I think that everybody's got the same wishes, peace, health, a living, to make a living, and
Oh, you'll be surprised. People are so creative with their lists.
Depends what your
I'll never
priorities
forget the guy who told me once in a shir that he needs to have a red Ferrari so he can get to shul on time. Apparently a yellow Ferrari doesn't just do it, just doesn't quite make it.
You have to be specific what you ask.
You have to be very specific, exactly. You know that story of the guy who gets down on his knees and he says, God, smite my enemies with a plague of locusts. And the next thing, this locust plague descends on his head. You know, you have to be careful how you phrase it sometimes. You know? Who's the enemy exactly? Now, if you ever want to understand the spiritual nature of anything in Judaism, you always have to look at what is either the main icon or the main ritual that represents that event or that idea, and it should hold the clues to tell you what it's all about. So, what's the main icon that represents Rosh Hashanah? You should be able to answer this knee-jerk. You should be able to just like impulsively say, if I say Rosh Hashanah, you say shofar. You have to, right? What else is there? Scales. Apples and honey. Yeah, but they're all symbols. But shofar undoubtedly has got to be the core element of what Rosh Hashanah is about. So if you want to understand the spiritual energy of the time, which will then help us to know how we're supposed to approach it, are we supposed to come with a list or something else? We're going to find the clues in the shofar itself. And we're going to examine this on a few different levels. 3 main themes we're going to look at associated with the shofar. One is technical halachic, one is symbolic, and one is historic. And we're going to sort of put them all together and try and create some sense of what the shofar is, what it does, and then based on that, hopefully know what we're supposed to be doing on this day. So let's start with the halachic. When last did you blow shofar? Never? No? No? Never blown shofar? No? Okay.
In Jerusalem.
Did you blow it? In a shop?
Yeah.
Did you try them out? So, when you go to shul, and you, on Rosh Hashanah, you know that the big mitzvah that you're supposed to do is the shofar. The fact is, you don't actually do it yourself. There's a paid professional, or I should say rather an unpaid professional, who blows the shofar. Now, let's compare that to any other mitzvah that you're supposed to do. Can I have a mitzvah? Can you suggest a mitzvah? Any mitzvah. Choose any mitzvah, pick a mitzvah. Any mitzvah? Mark, give us a mitzvah. Tefillin, right? Darren, tefillin. Tefillin. Can somebody else put on tefillin on your behalf? No. Okay, choose another mitzvah. Tzedakah, right? Can somebody else donate charity on your behalf? Yes, I know you're going to get all those emails at this time of the year. So-and-so has donated on your behalf, which is very nice. But it is not your mitzvah. So you have to give the money in order for you to do the mitzvah of charity. One more mitzvah, just for interest's sake. Choose a random one. Louis, what?
Maintaining Shabbat.
Keeping Shabbos, right? Can you pay somebody to keep Shabbos on your behalf? So I've got to work on Shabbos, but... No, I mean it really. I do work on Shabbos. But, I'm going to pay you to keep Shabbos on my behalf.
What about saying Kaddish?
Kaddish.
Delegate,
Kaddish. Can you delegate Kaddish?
You're not,
you can't.
study on
You can't delegate Kaddish. I'll talk about that in a second. You can't delegate Kaddish. It's in case of emergency. Then somebody could step in. But the mitzvah remains the mitzvah of the individual. Let's talk about study. Even if you had to pay 100,000 people to study on your behalf, you're still personally obligated to study as well. It means you can share in their mitzvah, but it doesn't excuse you of your mitzvah. Now, imagine if it was the same rule with the shofar. Imagine we all had to blow shofar ourselves. You think the service is long now. You imagine all these people like, trying to get a sound out, Okay? So it is pretty convenient that we listen to somebody else blowing the shofar, but at the end of the day, it's unique. It is unusual. In fact, let me ask you again, what is the mitzvah on Rosh Hashanah? The mitzvah is?
Hearing the shofar.
To hear the shofar.
To hear the shofar, right? Right? There's no mitzvah to blow the shofar. There's just a technical requirement that somebody has to blow it because we all have to hear it. But there's no mitzvah. If it was a mitzvah to blow the shofar, you'd walk into shul and instead of being handed a yarmulke and a machzor, you'd be handed a shofar. And can you only imagine the cacophony? Actually, I think it might be quieter than shuls currently are. Nobody'd be talking, they'll be trying to blow, and nobody's getting a sound out. Okay, so it's an interesting thing, don't you think?
Yeah.
It's a mitzvah which is observed by being passive. That's the requirement. Can you give me another example of a mitzvah that is observed by being passive? Megillah is a requirement. Firstly, it's a rabbinic law. Second of all, it's a requirement to read the Megillah. But we don't all know how. So therefore we rely on somebody else to read the Megillah. Sitting on a sukkah is not passive. You've got to go into the sukkah. You're supposed to do your things in sukkah, not just sit there like a golem. You're supposed to do things in a sukkah. Teishvu ka'ein teduru is the parameter of the mitzvah is that you have to be in the sukkah in a completely active role, not just sitting there. Technically, you fulfill the mitzvah the minute you walk in. Right? Let's take it one step further. This is higher grade. Anybody know what brocha, the person who blows the shofar, has to say? You don't have to tell it to me in Hebrew, tell it to me in English. Baruch atah Hashem, right? Who commanded us to, right? I'm the person blowing the shofar, right? I'm about to blow the shofar. What do I have to say? I have to say He commanded us to? To hear the shofar. Lishma'a kol shofar. It's not a mitzvah to blow. I don't say, even though I'm the person blowing the shofar, I don't say lit koya, that there's a mitzvah to blow the shofar. I say there's a mitzvah to hear the shofar. This is unique. This is an unusual mitzvah. It's unusual. It's different to pretty much every other mitzvah where you have to be proactive in some way. And even if we had to use the sukkah example, there's a debate whether the mitzvah is just simply to be there or is the mitzvah also to actually make the sukkah.
I thought it was the Brit Milah, the bris.
Bris is a mitzvah that is a proactive mitzvah. If a person's father did not take care of it, they have to proactively go and sort out their own bris.
You can't get anyone to do your own bris for you.
Okay? And the truth is, if you are creative enough in your thinking, by the end of this evening you should be able to see the link between the bris and the shofar anyway. But that's like bonus points at the end. So you notice what's happening over here. There is a mitzvah, which is a mitzvah to be passive, a mitzvah to hear rather than to make a noise. Now this is symbolic of what the whole Rosh Hashanah is all about. Hey, hang on a second. That tells me Rosh Hashanah is a time which is not about blowing your own trumpet. It's a time about being silent. Right? If you have to listen to something, you have to be silent. That's unusual, especially for Jews.
Good luck with that.
Exactly. And that's supposed to embody what this whole holiday is all about. It's about the silence of the individual, not about the speaking of the individual. That's very insightful. We have to explore that, and we have to try and understand and examine what does that mean. So that's the halachic department. Now we're going to look at the historic department. What is the historic origin of the shofar? Meaning, the actual type of horn that we use it takes us back to a particular historic story. Can anybody tell me which story? What? Sacrifice of Yitzchak. The Akedah, which we read as the Torah portion on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. So let's revisit that story for a moment, and there will be questions. So just, right, there's like a comprehension almost. I'm going to ask some questions. The story goes as follows. Yitzchak was how old? You don't have to give me an exact figure, just give me a ballpark. Is how old at the time of the Akedah story? Throw out all the Renaissance art that you know, and just focus on the story itself. He's how old?
83, second one was...
Who? Yitzchak. Yeah. So how old was his father?
120.
Okay, not bad. You're close with the father, not so much with Yitzchak. Any other guesses? 30 what? Amanda?
33.
Okay, that will do. He's 37 years old. So he's not this little innocent child whose father's just leading him up, because there was such a thing as child sacrifice back in biblical times. Those were little kids. Those were little kids who didn't have a say in the matter. This is an adult. And it's not just any adult. This is Yitzchak. Yitzchak was a pretty powerful, physically powerful man. If he didn't want to go be shechted, he could have opted out at any time. Besides, his father's 137. So in a face-off, I'd put my money on Yitzchak. So what happens is, God tells Abraham, I want you to take your son, your favorite son, your beloved son, the son that is the one and only unique son, all these different descriptions, take him up a mountain and bring him as an offering before me. So they set out early in the morning for what promises to be a wonderful hike. Yitzchak is oblivious at that stage. And they leave they had a little bit of an escort who they leave at the bottom of the mountains, just the two of them, father and son, walking up the mountain. And Yitzchak suddenly notices, he says, hey, hang on a second, you've got wood, you've got something to ignite the wood, you've got a knife. There's something missing from this picture. This has all the telltale signs of a sacrifice, except there's no sacrifice. And it's at that point, halfway up the mountain, where Yitzchak says to his father, what's going on over here? And his father tells him the good news. So they go up the mountain. And Abraham ties Yitzchak. He binds him. So he can't move. I mean, he literally ties his hands and legs. The man can't move. And he lifts the knife and he's about to come down and shecht his son when there's this booming heavenly voice that says, just kidding. And he looks a little beyond the altar, and there he sees a ram that's been tangled in the bushes by its horns. And that's the earliest reference that we have to the symbolism of a horn, particularly a ram's horn in Judaism. And that's one of the reasons we use a ram's horn as a shofar, because we want to say, hey God, you know who we are? We're those people's grandchildren. Those amazing people who are willing to sacrifice everything for you, we're their mishpocha. So, be nice. We were really dedicated to you a few thousand years ago, so please be dedicated to us still today. That's the story. What's the symbolism of the story? What's the symbolism? What is it? Is that purely just a story of sacrifice? Faith.
Not questioning.
Not questioning. Let's examine the story from a slightly different perspective. How much do you know about the personality of Abraham? What sort of a man was Abraham? If you would meet him in the street, how would you know it was Abraham? Tell me about his personality.
Very generous.
Generous, hospitable, yes? Any other terms you'd associate with Abraham? Gentle, yes. Wealthy is not a character trait. It's a bit of muzzle. Okay, so generous, hospitable, gentle. One key word that nobody's said yet, which would fit into all of those. Mensch. How's about kind? Yes, kind? Okay. Now, in Kabbalistic teachings, we talk about different energies. In fact, there are 10 energies altogether, and the whole world is structured around these 10 energies. 2 of the most prominent energies are exact opposites, and they're called chesed, which is represented by the right-hand column or the right-hand side of the human body, and gevura, which is represented by the left. Chesed is sharing, benevolence, kindness, hospitality, tolerance, gentleness. That all fits under the chesed category. So if you talk about a person like Abraham, he would epitomize chesed. He was the kindest, nicest, most generous, most accommodating, most tolerant human being you could ever meet. Think about it. As an elderly man, around about his 100th birthday, he was still running his free hotel in the middle of the desert for people who couldn't get their act together to take supplies. And he didn't charge for the service. He just had to say thank God and everything was fine. Nice guy. This is Abraham, who went running after God and saying, hey, hang on a second, how could you destroy the most amoral place on earth at the time? The 5 cities of the metropolis of Sodom and Amorah, which something like Hollywood, I think. And he goes running, he says, surely you can find one tzaddik in there. One tzaddik, how hard, one good person saved the whole city. He's the same person who goes running to rescue his nephew because his nephew made poor decisions and ended up in a lot of trouble, and he has to go run and rescue him. I mean, he's a man of absolute goodness and kindness. Yitzchak, his son, excels in the exact opposite extreme. He belongs to the energy called gevura. What's gevura? Now, disclaimer, before we get into this, people naturally associate Gevurah with something negative. It's not. It's an incredibly positive trait if you know how to manage it. As Chesed is an incredibly negative trait if you don't know how to manage it. So what is Gevurah? Okay, if Chesed is kindness and giving and sharing and hospitality and tolerance and all these things, and Gevurah is the opposite energy, how would you define Gevurah? What would the words be that are associated with it? Okay, selfish is negative. These can't be negative terms.
You.
Contained, yes. What do you say?
Arrogance, but
No, arrogance negative. Okay, so contained is a good one. What else?
Driven.
Driven, definitely. What else? Focused.
Discipline.
Disciplined. Okay? And part of disciplined would also be discerning. The Chesed person is accommodating. The Gevurah person is discerning. The Chesed person will take you warts and all. The Gevurah person will say, you need to earn that position. So as much as Abraham is the energy of Chesed, equally, Yitzchak is the energy of Gevurah. Very exacting. High standards. Intensity. These are all the things associated with Gevurah. And by the way, that's why you will find that Yitzchak has tremendously high standards throughout his life. He will never leave the land of Israel. He's very exacting. He has demands of himself which no other person in our biblical history had of themselves. His whole life is about measurement. You'll see that he's the person who's recorded in the Torah, the first person to measure amounts of his grain to be able to work out how much he's supposed to give away to charity. Abraham didn't do that. Abraham just gave and gave and gave. Chesed. Of these two archetype personalities, who do you think is more representative of Rosh Hashanah? Abraham or Yitzchak?
Abraham.
Okay, you're going to have to justify your answer, okay? So, I have two Abrahams. Why do you say Abraham? Rosh Hashanah is a time of forgiveness, yes? Forgiveness? Right. Did I hear somebody say Yitzchak? There had to be. It's a Jewish crowd. There has to be at least two opinions. Right? That's the third opinion. Says both. Okay. If we go back to one of the earliest things I asked you this evening, Rosh Hashanah is the day of judgment. Would that parallel Abraham or Yitzchak?
Yitzchak.
That's Yitzchak. That is exactly Yitzchak energy. Judgment. He is discerning, exacting, high expectations. That's Yitzchak. We would prefer a Rosh Hashanah that is more like Abraham, right? That's what we prefer. We want a benevolent Rosh Hashanah. We don't want God looking at our past years' worth of actions under His magnifying glass. I mean, if that's the case, none of us are going to be good enough. Right? You want to say something?
The weaker character sounds like Antonio from The Merchant of Venice.
I was so fortunate I didn't have to do that set work.
You'll Google it later.
Yeah, exactly.
You read in terms of archetypes.
Okay, I'll definitely, I'll Google it and use it. So the last thing we need is God who forgets nothing, who knows everything, examining all the stuff that happened in our lives over the last year with the most exacting, highest expectations like Yitzchak would, and based on that deciding what we deserve for the next year. Basically, round about now is when we should throw away the list. All right, I'm going to come along and say, God, I need. Oh yes, really? He's looking at the world through Yitzchak's eyes. In fact, according to Kabbalistic literature, we're told that Rosh Hashanah, certainly until the shofar is blown, and this is a key part of our discussion, is a time not of din, not of judgment, not of gevurah, of dina kashya, which means extreme judgment, extreme gevurah. This is like as harsh as it gets. It's the first part of Rosh Hashanah. Now, Can I pause for 1 second? I should have asked you this question earlier. But until we had this discussion, and perhaps even now while we're having this discussion, which day frightens you more, Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur? Huh? Now I think maybe Rosh Hashanah. Used to be Yom Kippur. For one good reason. Jews get very afraid if there's no food. You tell us we can't eat, we know it's serious.
That year is still coming.
Yeah, exactly. But slowly we should start to realize that the day that is the scary day is actually Rosh Hashanah. The same day we all have our whole family over and sit there just doing whatever we normally would do with apples and honey and meat and wine and, like, hey, it's a great Yom Tov. It's Rosh Hashanah. And then suddenly, hang on a second, whoa, did you see what the Kabbalah said about this? Dina Kashya. This is like the time that Hashem is the most exacting that He ever is. Maybe you just want to be quiet so that you feel like, don't say anything, don't do anything, don't notice me.
Yom Kippur is too late.
Yom Kippur is too late, exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Okay, maybe you're not such a Kabbalist. The Talmud calls it Yoima de Dina Rabbah, the day of the great judgment. Everybody thinks there's going to be a judgment day at the end of time. Forget about it, it's next week.
It's every year.
I'm only worried about this year for now. Dina Kashya, it's like hectic stuff coming up. It's a time represented by Yitzchak. It's that time of the year. Now, if you go and read what the Talmud says, it says that one of the reasons we blow the shofar is to get God, and this is obviously speaking metaphorically, but it's to get God to move from His so-called throne of judgment to His throne of compassion. Have you ever changed a plug? Yeah? That's a big achievement for a Jewish person.
No.
Normally you just pay someone else.
Normally you pay someone else, exactly. Normally you pay someone else to. Which color goes where, right? Well, this is a rewiring of energies that we're supposed to do on a cosmic level when we blow the shofar. And 99% of us are not even going to blow the shofar. In other words, there's one guy standing up there on the bima and it's all resting on him. Because that's what the Talmud says. That when you blow the shofar, that's when the switch happens from Midas Hadin, from strict judgment, to Midas Harachamim, to compassion, which we all need desperately. And what happens if that guy didn't prepare? What happens if he didn't do his homework? What happens if he's blowing the shofar and he's thinking, oh my gosh, I wonder what's for lunch? We could all just go down the tubes, God forbid. So this act of blowing the shofar is supposed to switch gears. A total 180. That story of Van when he got his new car? You know the story? And he takes it back to the dealer the next day. He says, a piece of rubbish. This Aston Martin that I bought. What nonsense. They say, what's the problem? He says, I'm going down the highway. I'm having an absolute ball. And I change into second. And I flying down the road over there, zooming past the taxis. And I throw it into third. And I shift it into fourth. What a pleasure. Fifth gear, I've never felt a car so smooth like this. The cops can't even catch up to me. It's a machaya, it's an absolute pleasure. He says, the problem started when I put it into R for race. That's what we're trying to do over here. We're trying to put the whole cosmic energy into reverse. And so the whole cosmic, infinite godly energy is all going in the direction of din, of gevura. And who said gevura is might? Yeah? Might. It's a powerful, powerful energy. And it's all going one way. And we want to put on some sort of a reverse valve. By blowing a horn. Oh, that's going to help.
Quite a horn then.
That better be one really good shofar if it's going to do that. How does this whole thing work? And incidentally, the symbol of how it works is that story. Let's go back now and reread the story. What ultimately is the story about? It's ultimately this. Let's talk about the story outside of the characters and rather in the symbolism. It's the story of what happened. What happened? Yitzchak represents Gevurah. Gevurah, he's the young one. He's the powerful one. He's the person who theoretically, as I mentioned, he should have dominated the proceedings. What happened? Gevurah got bound. That energy of strict judgment got tied down. It got restrained. And who did this to Gevurah? Who did it? Abraham. The icon of chesed, the sagely old, white-haired, smiling-face type personality who represents everything about benevolence and kindness. He successfully bound Gevurah and he limited Gevurah. He didn't kill it, but he was empowered at that time to be able to shift the energy. And as soon as he shifts the energy, Hashem says, he has a shofar. Now you know what a shofar is. Now that you've gone through this exercise, you understand that this is what Rosh Hashanah is trying to do. To take the Gevurah and tie it down so that the Chesed can take control. And the shofar is what's going to do that for you. So now you better work out how a shofar works. There's something very, very odd about that story of Abraham and Yitzchak. Something very, very odd.
But Yitzchak would have moved over to Gevurah because of the faith that he had in his father who was the tzaddik.
Okay, so let's hold off on Yitzchak for a second, because I'm more perturbed right now by Abraham. I'll tell you why I'm perturbed by Abraham. He's the last guy in the world who you would think would lead his son up a hill to kill him. Abraham is so not the suicide type. He's definitely not the bloodthirsty type. He's really not. I mean, think about it. Abraham is the guy who you would see, I mean, with respect, and obviously I'm being a little bit facetious over here, but you would expect him rather to be at a peace rally. You don't see Abraham wielding a knife against another human being. In fact, I could picture Abraham as the sort of person who wouldn't even entertain the thought of saying a word, raising his voice at another human being, let alone raising a big butcher's knife.
It's more Gevurah type of action.
He's behaving with absolute Gevurah. You don't get more Gevurah than that.
But maybe that's the key.
So what's he doing? What's Abraham doing in this story?
He's switching as well then.
He's not switching. He's doing something more profound than switching. What's he doing? He's what?
Obey.
He's listening.
Yeah.
He's listening. He's got a story to tell. Let me tell you, Abraham has a story to tell that is an unbelievable story. Any one of us would sit there enraptured for days on end as he told his story about kindness and chesed and sharing godliness in the world and going out there and being benevolent and hospitality and tolerance. And what's he doing at this point in time? Shutting down everything about who he is so he can hear a message he's never heard before. His whole life has been kindness and giving and tolerance and love. And now he's hearing a message, not that such a thing as Gevurah exists in the world, but that he should personify it. That is a complete shutdown of what would be his nature. His nature has to be totally passive in order to facilitate something that's going to take into a whole new world, a whole new paradigm. Much in the same way as Yitzchak has to be completely passive because he could have chucked his dad off the mountain and run away. He has to be completely passive and accept what's going to be done to him. So effectively, the story is that how do you switch the energy from Gevurah to Chesed? Ironically, not by doing what you do best as the Chesed, kind, loving person, but by rather hearing what you need to hear, which becomes the symbol of the shofar. The shofar is not about making a noise. It's about everybody being quiet to hear one person and their message, which ultimately isn't even their own message. There are no words. There are no musical notes. It's actually just an extremely primal, basic sound that each of us will probably interpret in a different way to the next person. It's a completely passive space. Which brings us to the third element, which is the element that ties it all together and will answer the question of, are you supposed to ask for stuff on Rosh Hashanah or not? Or maybe just to put it in the terms of how the title of the shir was worded, how do you get the blessings for the year? Let's think for one moment. If God is in Dina Kashya mode, which means if God is in intense judgment mode and you came with your list, what do you think the response would be? Can we use a human example? Let's use a human example. You run a little business, and you've got somebody who works for you. And they come with their list of demands. I want a raise. I want a bonus. I want more flexible hours, etc. What's your knee-jerk reaction? And I'm not judging here whether you're a Gevura or Chesed person, but the average employer, what's your reaction?
Laugh.
That what?
I laugh at you.
You don't have to laugh.
But I mean, yeah.
You deserve it.
You're going to say, you got a list? Guess what?
Leave.
So do I.
This is what you need to do.
I've also got a list. Here's my list. These are the 124 times you came late to work this year. These are the times that I caught you playing solitaire. This is the amount that you racked up on the company phone bill calling your girlfriend in a neighboring country. Right? You'll have a list of your own. And then you'll say, now let's talk. If we're going to come to Hashem with our list, and Hashem is in Dino Kashya mode, he's going to say, wonderful, I love everything you suggest. Would you like to hear my list? In the past year, I thought I would hear from you every single day. I only heard from you a couple of dozen times. In the past year, I expected you were going to give X amount of your income to my causes, aka charity. Didn't see much of that. On my list, there are dietary requirements. Steers is not one of them. Okay, and so on and so on and so forth. So I say, shall we compare lists? Okay, so I'm not sure that arriving with a shopping list is really the way to go, because inevitably he's got good stuff on us. So let's go to the symbolism of the actual shofar itself, because therein lies the secret. Have you ever made a shofar? Because you haven't blown a shofar. Have you ever made a shofar? You can. There's a shofar factory at Chabad House. You can actually go there and make your own shofar. They'll give you a horn, and you sit there and you saw and you hack and you knack and whatever. You can make a shofar. It will look like nothing you've ever seen before, but at least you'll feel you did something.
Is that a school trip?
They do it for all ages.
Okay.
But it does happen to be for schools. So a guy who I know was running a shofar factory elsewhere in the world, and he made his own shofar. Have you ever done anything, woodwork, any of those things, and it doesn't come out quite right, so you shave off a little bit again off that edge, but then it's not right on that edge, so you shave off a little more that edge and that edge and that edge, until eventually what was supposed to be a meter long pole is actually like 10 centimeters. You're not quite sure what happened. That sort of happened to his shofar. He obviously sawed off a bit here and a bit there and a bit here and a bit there, whatever, and he landed up with the shofar, which is probably just slightly wider than the person's fist, which is fine. That's 100% kosher. As long as it's wider than your hand, it's kosher. Except, your average shofar has a very nice thin mouthpiece, which is not the natural way that the horn is on the ram. It's been worked to look like that. It's been sanded down, and it's been put in boiling water and stretched and molded. And his wasn't yet at that stage, so the mouthpiece was actually very wide. He posted a picture on social media to a few people who he knows, I wouldn't say necessarily friends, but colleagues for sure, around the world. He wants to know, do you think the shofar is kosher because it's got such a big mouthpiece? The only unfortunate thing is the angle that he took the picture from made it look like it wasn't a shofar at all. It looked like it was a tube. In which case, would that be kosher? No. What does a shofar need in order to be kosher? What do you expect your shofar to look like?
Have a curve.
It's got to have a curve, right? Why do we have a curve in the shofar? To illustrate that we're supposed to also bend in submission to God. But you also expect your average shofar to be narrow on the end of the mouthpiece and wide on the other end. It'd be mighty difficult to get a decent sound out of it if it's not that way. But that's how you expect it to be, right? Narrow on the one end and wide on the other end. Which is associated with the words of King David in Tehillim, where he says, Min ha-meitzar karasi ka, anoni ba-merchav ka. I call out to God from the place that is narrow and constricted. And God answers me in the place that is broad and expansive. So the one end of the shofar is where I call out to God, the mouthpiece. That's where I call out to God. That place is small and constricted. And where the sound comes out, which is supposed to represent not my sound, but the sound of the message of the shofar, that's broad and wide. What's the lesson in that? The Talmud says, and be very, very careful how you interpret this. The Talmud says, any year, Sherasha bitchilasa, which is impoverished at its start, misasheres besoifa, will be wealthy at its end. And someone around this table right now is thinking if the converse is also true. My take on that is, if it starts off wealthy, decide that that is impoverished compared to the end. But that's what it says. Any year that starts off impoverished will end off wealthy. Same principle. Any year that starts off constricted and tight and stressful, like the mouthpiece of the shofar, you can look forward to it opening up and developing and being successful like the end of the shofar. Except that that's way too simplistic.
Depends on the individual's intention.
Right? How?
By their actions, by their thoughts, and by what they...
You're saying how the year pans out depends on your intentions and your actions.
No, or both.
Both.
Before and after.
Correct. So let's unpack. What does it feel like if, God forbid, a person is impoverished? Let's put this in context. Have you ever walked into a social function and known no one? Yeah? How does it feel?
Pretty much where I am right now.
Touche.
Feels awkward. That's how it feels.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, luckily, this is not a room full of, say, 300 people, because then it becomes more than awkward. It becomes
Come here
overwhelming.
and then try
Overwhelming, right? It becomes completely overwhelming. Let's be honest. It becomes completely overwhelming. Who do you think would walk into a room? Well, not who do you think? Do you think you could walk into a room with 300 people you don't know, clap on the table and say, ladies and gentlemen, I just would like you to know the reason you're all here tonight is because you need to get to know me. Right?
I'd love to see that, though.
Yeah, to make a great YouTube viral video. When a person is impoverished, it's not necessarily a financial thing. Impoverished is when a person feels that they are insignificant. That's what it means to be impoverished. Like the mouthpiece of the shofar, you feel that big. Any year that starts off, that during the Rosh Hashanah period, you feel impoverished, you feel insignificant, you feel silent, you feel passive, that year is going to get brachas. That year is where God says, if you call out from a place of constriction, from a place where you feel small, I will answer you from a place that's big. But if you call out from a place that's big, I'll say, you're good. You don't need me. Or, to put it into the context of how we've been discussing it, the person who comes to God from a perspective of not impoverished, what's the opposite of impoverished? Empowered. I feel empowered. I feel that I need these things this year. Entitled. Right? I feel that I'm justified in asking for health, wealth, nachas, safety, peace of mind, what all the things are. Red Ferrari. I feel entitled. God says, oh really? Did nobody give you the memo that this is the time of dina kashya? This is the time of strict judgment. We will take all your submissions under consideration. But the consideration process is quite hectic. So fine, you deserve all of those things if you live up to all of my things. If you don't, sorry. But if a person comes into Rosh Hashanah and says, I am here to be like the shofar is supposed to represent. I'm here to be like Abraham and Yitzchak, both were at the time of the Akedah. I'm here not to speak my story, but I'm here rather to hear what God expects of me. There was a chassid who once came to the first Chabad Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, and he had a personal audience. And the Alter Rebbe said to him at the end of it, he said, what you need, you're quick to ask. But what's needed of you, you failed to mention. If we walk into Rosh Hashanah, instead of saying, Rosh Hashanah is about me speaking, hey, I've got 48 hours to get all these things in. I better make sure, just in case you didn't hear me the first time, on the second day I'm going to ask again. Just in case he missed how much I need that money. God, listen, I really need that money. Instead of coming in like that, we walk into Rosh Hashanah, we say the mitzvah of the day is to listen. The experience of Rosh Hashanah is to power down everything about who I am and try and hear the message of who God wants me to be, what He wants me to achieve. Instead of the Rosh Hashanah being 48 hours of I need, take, how much can I ask for? It's like, can I hear something that God is asking of me for this year? And that's the nice thing about God. When it's asking of us, it's not asking 100%. He's asking one thing. One thing from us. Abraham had to do one thing. Yes, it was a big thing. Yes, it was something which was overwhelming for him, but it was one thing that was going to tip the scales of his whole life. The Talmud tells us that at that point God said, please get this one right, because if you fail, your whole life is going to be retroactively worthless. One thing. And he heard the message, and he did something which was completely outside of his paradigm, something which was completely uncomfortable for him. And with that, he flipped the energy. He flipped it from Gevurah to Chesed. Chesed overwhelms. It binds the Gevurah. You blow the shofar, what does it do? It flips the Gevurah to Chesed. Except we don't blow the shofar. We go into a position of saying, I'm ready to hear. What message is the shofar going to tell me about what I need to do this year? Because if we can switch the energy from divine Gevurah, which is so exacting and has had such high expectations, to divine Chesed, which is infinite giving and sharing and blessing, I've got news for you. The brachas that will come our way will be way beyond what our list would ever have thought of. Because now it's not our needs, it's God's kindness. So how do we unlock the blessings for the coming year, which is one of the main exercises of Rosh Hashanah? It's not by asking for what we need. It's about listening with our heart, listening with every fiber of our being. Because if you want to listen to something properly, you've got to shut everything else out. And that's the mitzvah of the day. Shut everything else out. My ideas, my expectations, my preconceptions, my understanding of what Judaism means to me. Shut it all out. And listen for a new message that I haven't heard before. Because the moment that happens, the energy flips, the chesed kicks in, the brachas flow, and then, please God, we have a year that we could never have dreamed of having. So I really hope, please God, that we can succeed in doing that, because it's really going to be worth our while. And please God, as Louis said before, we don't ask for things in the singular, we ask in the plural. So if at least some of us get it right, hopefully it should bring around enough bracha for everybody else as well.
So many of the miracles that you hear about, just in everyday life, seem to work on that principle.
Right.
Flipping the energy from...
Right. Let go, let God,
yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not only at the miracle level.
Yeah.
Think about when you're trying to solve a problem. We learned this in Tanya.
Yeah.
You try and solve a problem. The more you think you'll solve the problem, the more frustrated you become. Get distracted. I don't know, I always use the example. Take a shower, switch off your mind, boom, suddenly you get a perspective, an idea. That's the way that it works. It's essentially that we have to learn and realize we really are not in control. And so if we can just let go of that sense of wanting to be in control, then the brachas can come our way. But it's not simply letting go, it's also taking on a role. To take on a role. There's an expectation of us. What's that expectation? And it's unique. It's for each individual unique. The rabbi might have a particular theme in the sermon. Doesn't mean that that's specifically the thing for you. Every one of us is unique. And Rosh Hashanah is very personal. We've got to sort of open ourselves up to hear, what is the message for me? What am I supposed to be doing? Now, if I could only get that through to everybody, we'd have such a quiet Rosh Hashanah.
They don't want to make the switch so easily.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, quiet during the shofar would also be an achievement in its own right.
Why the shofar at the end of Yom Kippur? Is that?
Oh, we haven't touched Yom Kippur yet.
Yeah, that's a whole nother...
It's another whole discussion.
Rob, isn't listening in a way kind of active? Because it goes against everything we do on a normal day, because we're so busy and that listening requires us to reverse.
It's true. That is
true.
true.
We actually have to change
conscious
so much
listening.
of the consciousnly about actively listening.
That
we're so
is
cluttered
true.
And we're so...
Yeah. No, that's a very good point.
Because we're also
That's
making a switch to a degree.
Yes.
You switching out of your normal habit.
You're actually switching your own energy. That's why the term passive that I used is not in the sense of don't do anything.
Yeah.
It's a sense of not running and controlling the show. You're basically putting yourself in a position to receive. But you make a very valid point.
Be conscious.
Yeah.
Mr. Bennett wants to know what happens on Shabbos, that Rosh Hashanah that's on Shabbos.
Shabbos and Rosh Hashanah that coincide.
How do you switch the gears?
No shofar.
Then you've got to really be silent. Even the shofar's got to fall silent. Then you've got to hear the sound of the shofar that doesn't blow.
One hand clap.
Yeah, I didn't want to say that, but yeah, same concept. No, really, I mean, it just means that it's a whole different means of achieving the same result. Except that the advantage is when Shabbos and Rosh Hashanah coincide, then we're told that Shabbos helps us to achieve it easier. So you don't need the sound of the shofar because you've got the Shabbos energy just to sort of push you along. Sure, silence.
We're listening. No, this is how he wants his service to be.
Hasidim have a saying. Hasidim in Chabad we have something that's called a farbrengen. You ever heard of a farbrengen?